It's been a while since I've done a most overpaid players video, but they're always fun, so here we go. Now, there are a couple teams that don't have any overpaid players because they've managed their players and salaries really well, so I'll mention them first to get them out of the way. And they are the Pacers, who just need one more star to make their team great, the Pistons, who only have young players so it makes sense, the Nuggets, who've done great on their contracts, and the Lakers, who have done the same, which is why both of them are real contenders. But aside from those with them out of the way, here's the teams that really do have overpaid players, like the 76ers with Tobias Harris, who we will continue to mention every year of his contract because he's his team's highest paid player over Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons throughout the rest of his contract. I mean, at least they got rid of Al Horford's bad deal, but no surprise that there were no real takers for Harris's. He's a great player, but definitely not worth being the 14th highest paid overall player in the NBA. Then we have the Bucks and Chris Middleton, who's the 16th highest paid player in the league. And I mean, at least he's a two-time All-Star unlike Harris, who's never made an All-Star team. But that only helps Chris's case a little bit, because this season he's still being paid more than Giannis. And of course that changes next season, but we're not talking about next season, we're talking about now. And right now, Middleton's still paid too much. The Brooklyn Nets. Now if the Nets really had any overpaid players, they wouldn't be able to have the super team that they have today. So I wouldn't really consider anyone overpaid from the team. Some would argue DeAndre Jordan though, and that he should take the spot for making $10 million a year. It's not a ton, and I don't know that I agree with it, especially for what he does on the court, but I could see where people are coming from. The New York Knicks are up next with Frank Ntilikina, and even for him, you could only consider him a little overpaid because he's making $6 million this year. The Knicks have just done a good job with their payroll because Julius Randle's the only one on the team making double digits, and he's only making $18 million a year. But Ntilikina still takes this one no matter how much he's making because he's barely played this season and is averaging 2 points a game. The Hawks with Tony Snell. Now, Tony Snell is quietly shooting 56% from 3 this year, which is just insane. Now, it's definitely not a pace he's going to keep up over a long period of time, and he doesn't offer a ton on the court besides his shooting. He's a pretty quiet role player, and for him to be making $12 million a year just seems like a little much. Then for the Heat, now I usually don't account for injuries in determining each team's most overpaid player, but we have to here so we can give this one to Victor Oladipo. The Miami Heat look like they basically just stole him from the Houston Rockets, but since then, Kelly Olynyk's putting up godlike numbers, and Oladipo only played 4 games due to injury before being ruled out for the season. Oh, and by the way, he's making $21 million this season. Then we have the Celtics with Kemba Walker. Now, Kemba's Boston's highest paid player over Jaylen Brown, and still will be once Jason Tatum's new contract kicks in. You know, he's starting to come into his own and turn things around with his game and how he's been fitting in, but he still probably shouldn't be the Celtics' highest paid player and the 12th highest in the NBA this season. The Charlotte Hornets with Cody Zeller. Well, the Hornets are better than expected. Still not great, but Gordon Hayward and Terry Rozier are no longer Charlotte's most overpaid players because Cody Zeller is the 3rd highest paid on the team, making $15 million this season. He's an average center and has only started 20 games, and it's the last year of his big contract for him, so I could probably see him getting a deal on like $8 million a year next season for about half of what he's getting right now. The Washington Wizards then have Davis Bertans, and the spot could go one of two ways. Russell Westbrook could take it. Don't get me wrong, I'm giving him all the credit he deserves. He's been on a historic tear recently, but he still is the 2nd highest paid player in the entire league, making $41 million this year. And just for that reason, with him still being on a bad team, we could include him. But to keep some people happy, I'll give this one to Davis Bertans, who got a big 5-year $75 million deal just to come off the bench. The Chicago Bulls then come in with Al-Farouq Aminu. Aminu used to be a good role player for the Portland Trailblazers, but ever since then, he's been terrible. The Magic signed him to a 4-year $30 million deal a couple years back, and now this season for the Bulls, he's making $10 million. $10 million, and he's played in 6 games and is currently averaging 1.5 points a game. So after this contract, he may very well be out of the league. Then for the Raptors here, we could have this one go to no one, or give the slight edge to Pascal Siakam, because he's making $30 million in the 2020 and 21 season, and is the 30th highest paid player in the NBA, which isn't too bad, but he's just had a rough year, and for a player in his position that isn't showing great signs of improvement, it makes you wonder if this is the most we're going to get from him. For the Magic, Otto Porter is very oddly now by far their highest paid player. He's in the last year of his huge contract, earning $28 million this season, while the next highest on the team was Gary Harris at $19 million. And for Otto to be as bad as he has, he's way overpaid. I'll probably see him getting something under $10 million a year next season. For the Cavs, it goes to Kevin Love, and we all already know this one and why he's overpaid. Been like this for far too long. The Utah Jazz are a rare case though, because to be a contender, it means you don't have any overpaid players, because managing contracts so well plays a huge part on getting to the top. But the Utah Jazz have 2 overpaid players in Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert. Conley's still somehow the 10th highest paid player in the league, and Gobert's monster other contract that Utah was forced to pay him kicks in next season. For the Phoenix Suns, they don't have anybody overpaid, but I still wanted to mention them. Now, a lot of their guys are on good deals. They just deserve to mention because usually Chris Paul would run away with this spot. But from what he's done this season with them, there's no chance. Then for the Clippers, again, no one really, but we are going to give this one to Paul George just for the fact that he's getting paid more than Kawhi Leonard. He's on a bigger contract than his team's best player, so he had to be mentioned. The Dallas Mavericks then have Kristaps Porzingis, only by a little bit though, because right now this year Kristaps has been getting superstar money for not even playing like an all-star. He's been solid, but this isn't what Dallas wanted from him when they gave him that huge $158 million contract. The Portland Trailblazers spot then goes to CJ McCollum, and again, getting paid superstar money, 27th highest paid player in the NBA, but not playing up to that level, and he's never gonna. It makes sense why Portland pays him so much based on their system and everything, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a little much. Next up, the Golden State Warriors have Andrew Wiggins. Even on a new team with the improved defense and shooting, that doesn't stop Wiggins from making the overpaid list. Now honestly, I consider Draymond for the spot, but he's getting around $20 million a year, while Wiggins is getting about 30, so I gave the slight edge to him. Now don't get me wrong, he's been great, but I definitely wouldn't say he deserves that type of money, especially when he's only gone from being a decent second or third option to a good second or third option. Like, he improved, but he's still not a main star on any team. The San Antonio Spurs then have DeMar DeRozan. I mean, we rarely ever hear from DeMar DeRozan anymore. It's the last year of his big contract though, so it's going to be interesting to see the kind of deal that he gets in free agency. He's currently getting paid twice as much as anyone else on the team, and it's tricky with him. He's still only 31, so I can see him maybe getting a deal around $20 million a year in the offseason, maybe by the right team. Then we have the Pelicans and Steven Adams. This season, Steven Adams is their highest paid, slightly ahead of Brandon Ingram, and the near $25 million a year that he's been getting these past few has always been too much. It was more acceptable a couple years ago when he was younger because we didn't know what his ceiling was, but now we do, and after this year his contract drops off to him making about $17 million a year, which sounds a lot more acceptable. The Sacramento Kings most overpaid player now is Harrison Barnes. Barnes has been overpaid for a few years now, and I still don't know why. He's an undersized power forward that's a pretty good scorer, but that's about it. He hasn't gotten a ton better in years, and I don't know why he keeps getting big contracts. I mean, he's solid, but there's a lot of other players just as good as him that don't get nearly as much. The OKC Thunder spot then goes to Al Horford, who is still obviously one of, if not the most overpaid players in the league. And if you haven't seen OKC's salary situation yet, this is insane. I've never seen anything like this. You got Horford right here making $27 million a year, then nobody else on the entire roster making over $4 million. Pretty much for the next 2 seasons. So OKC's in a great position. They got a monster amount of cap space and draft picks. For the Timberwolves, it goes to Ricky Rubio. And the Wolves are interesting because you could go 2 ways with this one. You could easily say either Ricky Rubio or D'Angelo Russell are the most overpaid on the team. Rubio's had a weird year that's paying him $17 million to average single digits for meaningless minutes on the Wolves. And D'Angelo Russell has barely made any difference on this team since he got there almost 2 years ago. He doesn't really play like a star anymore and doesn't help them get wins, so it's hard to justify him getting paid $30 million a year. And finally, we have the Rockets and John Wall. Came out this year, starting to look like he wasn't overpaid actually, but after a 20-game losing streak and another season-ending injury, his $40 million a year makes him the most overpaid player in the NBA today. And that's gonna wrap things up. I'm thinking about doing the most underpaid NBA players soon, so comment down below if that's something you want to see, drop a like, subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.